Hello, welcome back to the Happy Heat Pump podcast. A reminder, this is a side hustle for me. I'm Evan Davis, nothing to do with my day job at the world's greatest broadcaster. I'm with Bean Beanland of the Heat Pump Federation. Together, we like to chat through different issues around the transition we are in the process of making this country away from gas boilers towards heat pumps. I think this is just such an interesting and big project for the country. I'm just interested in how it's all going to happen. And there are myriad issues that we discuss on this podcast. Bean is the aficionado. I'm the one who asks the questions. Bean, today I think we should talk about installers, right? Because it comes up in different among our conversations that if you're going to install a heat pump, a lot is going to matter on having someone competent to configure how you're doing it and to install it. So let's go back to the very beginning of this. Where do I find a competent heat pump installer, and what badge do they have to have that I know they've installed a heat pump before?
So this is the single biggest challenge for most homeowners at the moment, finding themselves an installer. And I absolutely accept that this is the single biggest challenge. But I don't think that we're that different to most industries in that we've got some really, really talented people. And at the other end of the scale, we've got some people who are less talented and some that just actually don't care. You're right, cowboys. I mean, every industry has them. But I also look back and I think that, what was life like at the beginning of the central heating era in the 60s? Because I'm pretty sure that some of those original installations were pretty terrible. Actually, one could argue that some of them are still not very good because many of our condensing boilers are not configured to condense. And you'd say that's a fundamental failure. But anyway.
What am I looking for? There must be some accreditation thing that is the minimum and isn't just a thing where they pay 200 quid a year to get the badge and doesn't tell me anything.
There is accreditation. You're absolutely right. But it doesn't get you away from doing some homework. I think that we, as a society, we run the risk sometimes of over-accrediting, and then people rely on the accreditation process, and they forget that they've got an obligation of their own. There's still a buyer beware in many things, particularly when you're making a large purchase. If you're buying a house, you would make sure that you get all the help you get to make sure it's not going to fall down, it's not already owned by somebody else, all those sorts of things. I appreciate that putting in a heat pump system isn't like buying the house in the first place, but it's still a sizable purchase for most people. So a bit of due diligence and a bit of homework goes an awful long way. It's one of the reasons why the one document that we publish on our own website, the Heat Pump Federation website, that's public facing, is a procurement guide. So it doesn't teach you how to install the heat pump, but what it does do, it's intended to equip a homeowner or a landlord to be able to discuss with a potential installer and work out whether they are A, competent, B, know what they're doing, and C, will treat them fairly and look after them not only during the process, but also afterwards. And we talked about doing a piece on maintenance and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, what am I getting? Because I think there are two processes. Let's suppose I want to install, I'm replacing my heating, I'm taking out the gas boiler, I'm doing a little bit of renovation, let's say, because this is a good time to
It's a good trigger point.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. I'm doing a bit of work. There are two things. I need someone to design where I'm going to put the heat pump, which heat pump is going to go in, is this going to be air to air, or is this going to be air using the existing radiators that I've got, or how am I going to do? So that's if you like a white collar job. I'm thinking someone who's knows design, and then I need someone who's going to put the heat pump in, which is a completely different skill set. But they're going to have a spec, and it's going to be put it here, and this is where the pipes are going. Are those two different things, or am I getting one contractor to do all of that?
So I think that the scenario that you've described does exist, but there are extremely good installers who would be able to do everything that you've described. However, there is something a bit more fundamental going on here. So we have something, and I don't know I'm not sure what PAS stands for. I'm sure somebody will write and tell us. PAS, PAS 2035, which is the standard assessment process for a holistic review of one's property. So somebody who is PAS 2035 certified, a certified assessor, should be able to come round and discuss with you the house, what your intentions are, whether you're going to be extending it, how your lifestyle is, how do you live in it, whether your aspirations are to improve insulation, put solar on the roof, all these things. There's a fully holistic view, out of which would come a potential number of projects, one of which could be, well, we're going to put in an S.
But I don't believe they will be close enough to the heat pump industry to tell me, look, you need one this capacity, this.
That's true.
This, and I'm going to tell you, I think you should put it here because that allows us to take a pipe through here, which is going to be much better than doing it over here. And that's what I think. Now, you telling me that a good installer will be able to do that, and then say, get the the one made by this Japanese company, or get the British one made by the boiler makers.
Yeah, a good installer will be able to do all of those very direct things that are implied by putting a heat pump in. So discuss where's the best location. You're right. The ideal location, of course, is on the wall directly outside where your current gas boiler is. But that's not always necessarily the best place.
You need someone who knows what they're doing to talk you through that, and that's a process and a conversation that you're going to have.
It is.
So they can't just tell you where you're going.
No, but that's part of the assessment.
Yeah.
That's part of the assessment the homeowner makes of the installer who's standing in front of them, itching for the work.
What worries me, though, Bean, is when you come to something like solar on people's roofs. This has been an industry where people have come and gone with abandon. They enter and then they disappear. They go bust, and so there's no aftercare, number one. Two, they have been willing to survey and design schemes for households and price them on the basis of looking at Google satellite pictures of the house and say, oh yes, this is a sort of 4 kilowatt capacity installation, and we'll put 3 here and 1 here. And I mean, it's just, that's not the way to do it properly. You need people to come round, have a long conversation about 3 options, and then say, let's do it like this. And
there is a new feature to the way that we acquire heat pump systems. It is new in that most domestic gas installations do not go through this process. They should, but they don't. So we should, and in our world, in the heat pump world, we will be doing formal heat loss calculations. So a heat loss calculation is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a way of assessing the building for losses through the fabric, windows, walls, doors, floors, roofs, and also ventilation losses. So the total loss is made of these 2 components. Ventilation loss is driven by things like draft and making sure that you've got enough fresh air coming into the building to sustain breathable atmosphere and all those good things. We should be doing that for all of our heating systems. We tend not to do that for gas systems because at the moment we've got about 14 million properties or so in the UK which have a combi boiler. The combi boiler is sized around delivering enough hot water, so it tends to be a sort of 28 to 35 kilowatt unit, when the average home in the UK has a heat load, maximum heat load of about 8 to 10 kilowatts. So you've got a massive boiler. You don't have to calculate the heat loss because you know it's going to be covered. In heat pump world, we are looking to much more closely align the capacity of the heat pump with the task that it's going to be doing, albeit maybe allowing headroom for extensions or whatever it might be. But it's a much closer relationship. And we also have to make sure that in individual rooms, the radiators or underfloor heating or whatever it is you're using to distribute the heat is appropriately sized so that you make sure you can maintain the temperature of the room. So there's a formal process there, which is, it's not new. We should be doing it anyway. We tend not to. We absolutely have to when we're...
And it's very interesting you say that, because I remember renovating a house in which I live, we did the calculation for each room, how much radiator we need. We never did that with the boiler. The guy putting the boiler in just put the boiler he thought we needed in. He didn't even tell us what make it was. It was like, oh, he's put the boiler in, which is to your point. But I still feel, Ben, you haven't told me how to find a good installer. Am I going to phone Yellow Pages? Do I?
No.
I mean,
No.
Is there still a Yellow Pages?
A while back, no, it doesn't. A while back, somebody, an entity in the industry, shall I say, said to me, we're going to put out an infographic, Bean, on how to choose an installer. And we're going to say, go to Yellow Pages or equivalent, pick 3 that are nearest to you, get them all to give you a quote and buy the cheapest. I said, absolutely not. That is a disastrous way of progressing. Thank you very much. So, I mean, if I think about what our procurement document says, it reminds people of things that actually they should already know. There's nothing really demanding in there. So it's simple things like, are they properly insured? Do they have insurance? There's a legal requirement to have product liability and what have you. There's no legal requirement to have professional indemnity insurance, which is about design. Ideally, I think you should be looking for an installer that does carry PI insurance.
Absolutely.
Ask for it. Ask to see the certificate before you get into the contract. Take up references. Go and see some of their work. Talk to the owners. You know, these sorts of things are pretty basic about buying large things in one's life, but we tend to forget about it. And this is where I'm concerned about this idea of over certification. Because someone comes along and says, look, I've got a street full of badges here, I must be good. That actually isn't true in any walk of life. You know, I know plenty of people with driving licenses. Doesn't mean that they're all good on the road. So we do have to have, there's a lot more nuance here. And one of the really good options now is, we go back to our Nesta that we've mentioned previously. They now have something called Visitor Heat Pump, where heat pump owners offer to take in visitors. So you can go and visit a heat pump in your neighborhood.
The real devotees. These are the people I hope are listening to this podcast because they just want more heat pump.
Absolutely. And so you'll go around and you'll be able to see it.
Heat pumps.
You'll be able to hear it critically. We talked about noise before. You'll be able to talk about who did it. Were they good? You know, because like everything else in life, personal references are still top of the tree when it comes to finding yourself really, really good installers. So all the installers, if you're taking government incentives, all the installers need to be certified by the microgeneration certification scheme.
That's it. So
MCS. There was a mandate
again, just so everyone.
It's MCS. It's the microgeneration certification scheme. If you're taking any form of government incentive, whether it's the boiler upgrade scheme for the able to pay market or one of the schemes for social housing, there is a mandate in the regulations. You must use MCS certified installers and MCS certified equipment.
Okay.
Outside of those programs, there is currently no mandate. So new build, which doesn't get any government assistance, there is no mandate for MCS. I would argue that there is a degree of consumer protection involved where, particularly once MCS 2.0 is launched in the new year, we will see people, I think, asking for it, even if there's no mandate.
But so that would be a kind of minimum standard. Use your brain when you pick someone, and you'll be able to tell whether they've got the time to think about what they're advising you to do and to talk through it. After intelligent questions like, do you have proper insurance covering all aspects of the installation? Just a last one then, Bean. Is this the relationship you're having with the installer? I could see 2 ways you have that. That could be transactional, one night stand, or it could be more like a marriage, that once the system is in, you will call them if there's a problem, you'll call them to service it. Is that what's meant to happen? I go back to them and they look over it every now and then. And
I would say it's a bit like buying a brand new car. So you would have a relationship with the dealer that says that they will provide servicing and maintenance for at least the length of the warranty, for example.
Yeah.
And so I think it's much more like that. And ideally, you would have an installer who will provide that ongoing service. And there's another element to this in that most heat pumps units are now internet enabled. which means that if you have a problem, if you've got a fault or whatever, the first line of defense is for an installer to be in his office and go, well, I can dial into your machine, Mrs. Miggins, and I can see that actually it's a blocked filter or whatever it might be. And that relationship, of course, needs to be managed. So you would have a relationship with the installer that says you will keep an eye on that and be able to do that. The great thing about that internet ability is that it also means that in things like social housing, it's possible to keep an eye on whether or not people are underheating, or whether they've created a problem for themselves without realizing it by pressing the wrong buttons and either creating an underheating risk or an overheating risk, of course, and also if we're running the system inefficiently and creating a big electricity bill problem. So there is a lot of real benefit to society coming through in those sorts of things. And you want to let the installer choose the machine largely. You talked about, do you choose a machine from X, Y, Z, import, export, homegrown? Yeah, I mean, I'd love people to buy British, of course, and we're increasing the number of units we're building in the UK all the time. But you want the installer to be installing a machine with which they have expertise, because they're all slightly different. You don't want to say, I want you to install that. And he says, well, I've never seen one before. You wouldn't take your Ford to have it serviced at a BMW garage if it's under warranty.
I tell you what, I hope there are some installers who are tuning into this Happy Heat Pump podcast theme, because there are thousands of installers. I mean, we're training more, right? Is that right? We're training.
Training program is really, really strong at the moment. So I mean, and the training
it's a good career, because if we are going to install 25, I say 25 million, probably isn't going to be that many, but let's say 20 million heat pumps.
One way or another, we're going to service every building in the land.
That is a lot of work. That is going to keep someone who is leaving school now potentially busy for their career if they're good at it. I mean,
there's another whole episode on training and provision of the workforce of the future, actually, because that is a critical problem. Because the plumbing industry, plumbing and heating sector, the average age in that sector is the wrong side of 40.
So we need younger people to go.
There are many people in plumbing and heating who are within 10 years of retirement who are saying, well, actually, why do I want to learn this new technology? There's going to be gas and oil around for the rest of my career. I don't have to do this.
Absolutely.
So we do absolutely have to start backfilling. This is where apprenticeships and a fundamental change to the national curriculum, actually, which is under review at the moment. Again, that's another episode.
Well, I think that is a really, really interesting thing. We should do a special episode for the installers as opposed to the.
Well, I think it would be.
No, we should do it. Another
training varies enormously.
So much to talk about on the Happy Heat Pump podcast. I hope you're sort of following our journey here. There's just a world of heat pumps that is rich in topics for our podcast. Do keep your comments coming, questions. We will be having some episodes where we deal with the queries we've had from people who've been following us, and comment, review, subscribe, all of that, and we'll see you very soon.